In late May 2025, with no press conference and no fanfare, the White House established an Interagency Governance Board on Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena. The executive action, issued through the National Security Council, creates a multi-agency coordinating body that sits above the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, AARO, and draws in civilian agencies alongside the Department of Defense and the intelligence community, the FAA, NASA, the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of Energy, all now formally linked under a single UAP governance umbrella controlled by the executive branch. The question no one in Washington seems to want to answer directly: does this accelerate disclosure, or does it build a more sophisticated architecture for managing what the public is allowed to know? Structurally, the Interagency Governance Board functions as a policy coordination mechanism. It doesn't collect evidence. It doesn't investigate cases. It governs how agencies share UAP-related information with each other and, theoretically, with the public. Think of it as a traffic control layer, deciding which data flows where, which agencies have equities in specific cases, and how competing classification authorities interact. Before this board existed, ARO reported primarily through the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and the Director of National Intelligence. Civilian agencies like the FAA, which handles thousands of pilot reports annually, had no formal seat at the table. Now they do. But having a seat and having a voice are not the same thing. To understand why this board exists now, you have to understand what Congress failed to deliver. In late 2023, Senators Chuck Schumer and Mike Rounds introduced the UAP Disclosure Act as an amendment to the National Defense Authorization Act. It was historic in scope, modeled explicitly on the JFK Assassination Records Collection Act of 1992. It would have created an independent review board with subpoena power, compelled federal agencies to disclose UAP records, and established a legal presumption of disclosure rather than secrecy. The legislation was gutted during conference negotiations. Key provisions, eminent domain authority over recovered materials, the independent review board itself, were stripped under pressure from House leadership, reportedly driven by representatives aligned with defense and intelligence community interests. What survived was weakened. The Interagency Governance Board can be read as the executive branch's attempt to fill that vacuum on its own terms. Representative Tim Burlison of Missouri has been pushing a parallel approach from the House side. His proposed UAP Records Review Board would function as an independent body, appointed by Congress, not the White House, with authority to review classified UAP records and recommend declassification. The JFK precedent matters here. The Assassination Records Review Board operated from 1994 to 1998, released over 5 million pages of documents, and critically, operated independently of the agencies whose records it reviewed. Burlison's model seeks to replicate that independence. The structural difference is fundamental. An executive governance board answers to the president. An independent congressional review board answers to the statute that created it. One can be dissolved with a memo. The other requires an act of Congress to dismantle. The critical issue is authority. The Interagency Governance Board, as currently constituted, operates within existing classification frameworks. It cannot override a special access program. It cannot compel an intelligence agency to declassify material that the agency head deems sensitive. It coordinates, it does not command. Former ARO Director Sean Kirkpatrick repeatedly stated that his office faced resistance from elements within the intelligence community when seeking access to legacy UAP programs. If ARO, with its statutory mandate, couldn't break through those walls, a governance board operating under executive authority faces the same barriers, unless the president explicitly directs otherwise. So far, no such directive has been made public. While Washington debates governance architecture, Harvard astrophysicist Avi Loeb has been building something different. The Galileo project, which Loeb founded in 2021, announced an expanded advisory council in early 2025, a civilian scientific body designed to conduct independent UAP detection and analysis entirely outside government control. Loeb has been characteristically direct about the rationale. He told reporters that science should not wait for government permission to investigate phenomena that may represent the most significant discovery in human history. The Galileo project operates its own sensor network, conducts its own analysis, and publishes through peer review rather than classification systems. It functions as a civilian counterweight to both the Executive Governance Board and congressional proposals, a third path that bypasses the disclosure debate entirely by generating independently verifiable data. What we're witnessing is the emergence of three competing architectures for handling the UAP question: the Executive Branch Governance Board, centralized, classified, controlled by the sitting administration; the Congressional Review Board model, independent, statute-based, modeled on proven declassification precedent; and the civilian scientific approach, decentralized, transparent, accountable to peer review rather than political authority. Each has strengths, each has vulnerabilities. The executive board can act quickly, but can be quietly defunded or restructured by any future president. A congressional board carries legal weight, but requires legislative majorities that have proven elusive on this issue. Civilian science generates credible data, but lacks access to the classified evidence that whistleblowers like David Grush allege exists within government vaults. The next 6 months will be decisive. Burlison's review board proposal faces a narrow window in the current congressional session. The Interagency Governance Board's first coordinated report is expected before the end of fiscal year 2025. And Loeb's Galileo Project Advisory Council is scheduled to release findings from its expanded sensor network in the same time frame. These three tracks will either converge or collide. The fundamental tension hasn't changed since December 2017, when the New York Times first revealed the Pentagon's Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. The public's right to know versus the national security apparatus's instinct to control. What's changed is the architecture of that tension. It's no longer a single pipeline that can be quietly shut off. It's a distributed system, imperfect, contested, but increasingly difficult to suppress entirely. The question is no longer whether disclosure will happen. It's who gets to control the terms.